Hello, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, Colonel in control. In the last few episodes, we've done a detailed exploration of what happened the night that Elvis fell, hit his head, got a golf ball sized lump on the back of his head, suffered a concussion, spent some amount of time in bed recovering, reported by Billy Smith as being 10 days that he personally spent in the room with Elvis, being reported by Larry Geller as 2 weeks, based on dates that Peter Goralnik has uncovered. It looks more like it was 2 days. And he probably spent a few more in bed, but there was a meeting 2 days after Elvis hit his head. And in that meeting, the Colonel laid down the law. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Before we jump back into today's story, we're going to play a song. And this song is about the dreams that Elvis had that he was not fulfilling while he was here in Hollywood, and about what he really wanted to be doing. And these are his Circle G dreams.
I drew a line in the dirt, said this land could be yours. 1 acre each, a house, a porch, a door. I saw the light in their eyes, like stars in the dust. But the paper stayed blank, and the dream gathered rust. I wasn't cash poor, I was rich in belief, trying to carve out a kingdom beneath the cotton clouds and the Mississippi sun. But every time I reached, the dream came undone. Don't you forget what I tried to make, a home for the hearts I refused to forsake. They called it a whim, they called it a waste, but I saw a commune, not just empty space. Don't you forget me when the fences arise, when the ranch house fades and the silence lies. I gave you the downy, I gave you the land, but the kingdom never built still lives in my hand. They said zoning laws, they said legal red tape, but I saw a chapel in every landscape, a replica of Graceland, a circle of trust. But the curl was bust, and the dream turned to dust. I signed the checks, I made the calls, watched the trailers roll in like prayer storms. But Vernon's face, tight as a gate, held back the flood of what I tried to create. Don't you forget what I tried to give, a place where my people could finally live. They called it a farm, they called it a phase, but I saw a future in the ranch's haze. Don't you forget me when the lights go out, when the house plans fade and the voices doubt. I gave you the downy, I gave you the land, but the kingdom never built still lives in my hand. Still lives in my hand. Still lives in my hand.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we're going to hear about the Colonel in control. But we're going to start with a fact that I know has something to do with 1967, but I don't know exactly when it becomes an important fact in 1967. But it's sometime around now, or when they come back to film Clam Bake, or maybe just a couple of months later. But right now, we're talking about Hollywood. We're in California. But we're focused on Hollywood, Los Angeles. That's where all this is taking place. But about an hour south of Los Angeles is Palm Springs. And the Colonel owns a house in Palm Springs. And it's an area where wealthy people gather, and a lot of them have houses there. And soon after Elvis is married, they'll have a house in Palm Springs, and they'll spend a lot of time in Palm Springs. Now, in the downtown area of Palm Springs, there's a Mexican restaurant. It's the very first Mexican restaurant that ever opened in Palm Springs, at least in the downtown area. And it opened in 1958. So it was definitely there in 1967. And Elvis used to go to this restaurant. He went to it enough that he had a favorite booth. And so if you've ever been to Memphis, there's a restaurant in Memphis called The Arcade. And they have a booth. And it's the Elvis booth, and you can request it, and if it's not busy or you get lucky, you might be able to sit in it. And Elvis definitely went to the Arcade restaurant, but we don't really have specific stories of him there. And so it's somewhat questionable if he even had a favorite booth. But the Arcade has embraced the legend, they've embraced the myth, and they set aside this booth. And if you go to Tupelo, and you go to Johnny's Drive-In, where Elvis used to eat dough burgers, which are like hamburgers, but the patty, instead of being made with 100% ground beef, is made of a mixture of ground beef with dough, so that the patty costs less, and therefore the entire burger costs less. And those would be the burgers that Elvis most often ate as a child, age 13 and under. And in that restaurant, there's a booth. That's an Elvis booth. So again, I don't know if Elvis really sat in that booth the most, or if they too have just embraced the legend, because they certainly have. And it's a great place to eat. Both places are great places to eat. If you're ever in Memphis or you're ever in Tupelo, check out the Arcade or Johnny's Drive-In. But in Palm Springs, there's another place, and it's called Las Cusuelas. And I'm probably butchering that. Let me put it in the chat so you guys can actually see how it's spelled. So Las Cusuelas, and it opened in 1958. And apparently today, I mean, it's still open, I believe. And they say that today they're still using the same recipes that they started out with in 1958. And there's a booth for Elvis there. So I don't know if he ate there often enough to have a favorite booth. But they say that he sat in their restaurant many times. And he always ordered the same thing. And this is what he ordered. You can see it on screen. So, frijoles ranchero, I believe is what they call it, but it's ranchero beans. And he would get an iced tea to go with it. And I believe you would eat it with the chips. Hi, Pat. Thank you for coming. You made it just in time to see Elvis's favorite Mexican dish. Which I believe they call frijoles ranchero. But it's these beans, these ranchero beans in a dish like this, with these ingredients that you can see on screen. You eat them with these chips, and he would get an iced tea every single time he ate at this place. Now, I never even knew Elvis ever ate any Mexican food till I found this article. And this place embraces Elvis. They've got the Elvis booth, so they're claiming that this happened. And they've been there since 1958, so I mean, they've got a long history. And so now there's another place I'd like to go try to eat. And of course, it's a long way from me, so I'm probably going to have to settle with just trying to make this dish myself. And see what Elvis liked about it. Let's reorient ourselves into the timeline with this calendar. On March the 5th, on Sunday, that's when Elvis came to Hollywood. Now, 1 week before the 5th, Sunday the 26th, that's the day Dr. Nick came out, and he treated Elvis for saddle sores. So you can see that the amount of time that Elvis delayed the movie was 1 week. 5 days, 1 week. Because they don't work on the weekends, so 5 actual days. And then he flies out to Hollywood on the 5th. On the 6th, he reports to wardrobe. There's a kerfuffle because of the size of his waist. He records what's left of the soundtrack. On the 7th and the 8th, we're not really sure what he did. Now, the way Larry describes the 9th is that that's the first day of pre-production. Or of actual production. I think they're going to actually start filming that day. From the way that Larry says it. So, I'm thinking they're doing pre-production. Whatever Elvis has left to do on wardrobe, running through lines, meeting with his makeup people, meeting with anybody else he may want to talk to, last minute instructions from the director as he prepares. Not sure what all Elvis would do. We know he received the script apparently on the 6th or the 7th because there's some kind of meeting with him, the executives, the colonel. Nobody's in on it except for the colonel and those executives. Stories are told later that the executives laid down the law and told Elvis that it was their way or the highway. I feel that at this point in time, when Elvis was already angry, that this meeting was more about soothing the angered beast than riling him up a little more, because we'd already had a week of delay. Plus, he delayed a little bit before by not coming out to record the soundtrack. So there's been resistance on his part. The executives know that. So something happens, maybe the 8th, maybe the 7th. We're not exactly sure. But since he just got the script, I'm sure he's busy trying to memorize it. Now, I've often heard that Elvis had a photographic memory. I'm not exactly sure what that means, because I think most people who use the term, they don't have a photographic memory, so they're not sure what it means either. I don't have one. But the idea is that Elvis could just look at a page and he'd be able to pull that page up in his memory and read from it. And that may be true, but then you wonder, why did he travel with trunks and trunks of books if he could just pull the pages up in his mind and remember them? So I don't think it was as easy as a photographic memory. I think he had a very good memory. I think his memory was linked to sound, because he had this gift with sonic stuff, with sound. And so that he could hear the lines when they were read to him or when he read them. And then he would remember what he had heard. I think it was more like that, but I don't really know. It's just me guessing. But no matter how he did it, I mean, the whole script for the movie, you got 2 days or maybe 3 to get ready, and that seems to be the standard schedule. Because I'm sure they could have got the script to him the week before, even if he had saddle sores, if it was ready. Or maybe he's seeing a new draft of it. Maybe he asked for changes. And maybe that's what the fight about. It's not so much the poor quality of the script, but the poor quality of the script after specific changes were asked for. We don't have any record that he did ask for those changes. We don't have any record that he didn't. What we know is he's very angry, and they're having a meeting with him. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So then he falls overnight from the 8th to the 9th. Now, we've heard from Priscilla that it's much more in the morning that he falls. Based on his schedule, he probably has to be at the studio. I can't imagine later than 8 o'clock. Maybe 9 a.m. So if we say 9 a.m., he probably needs a good half hour to get there. They probably leave around 8:15, which means the guys probably arrive around 8 a.m. So Elvis probably gets up around 7, maybe as early as 6. You know, if they're getting to the studio at 8 instead of 9. But somewhere in there, Elvis gets up, he falls in the bathroom. Priscilla hears him immediately and rushes in. He's able to walk himself back to the bed. Feels that he needs to lie down. Larry shows up because he doesn't live at this house. And he's in the den and says that it's unusual for Elvis not to be out eating breakfast at this point. So I think we have to assume that's somewhere around, let's say 8 o'clock, if he has to be at the studio by 9, that Larry's come in sometime between 7:45 and 8. Usually by this point, Elvis is out eating breakfast, doing the last few things he's got to do to get ready, and they're all piling into the cars probably by 8:15. A lot of traffic in Los Angeles, even back then. So then both Billy Smith and Larry described that Elvis walked out of the bedroom, rubbing his head, saying that he'd really taken a hit. In Larry's memory, he makes several statements about being hit. Based on what Priscilla's saying, it doesn't appear anybody hit him. He fell and she's there immediately. So nobody's in the bathroom. Nobody's done anything, according to Priscilla. Larry, he hears this stuff about being hit, though. Billy doesn't hear so much of that. He hears more that Elvis banged his head. They both agree Elvis has a knot the size of a golf ball on his head. And they both agreed he walked out of the bedroom. And then Marty Lacker agrees that Elvis did walk out of the bedroom. And then Marty helped him back into bed. Now, Marty, Billy, Larry, they never mention Priscilla. Sonny mentions Priscilla, Sonny West. But nobody else mentions Sonny West. So we don't know if he's there either. We don't even know how many guys are here. We just know there's several people. And of the several people, nobody calls a doctor. And there's varied accounts of how things happen, but Priscilla's seems to be the most precise, assuming she was there and this went along the way that she said. She found him in the bathroom. She got him into bed. She immediately called Joe Esposito. Joe Esposito came. Now, Priscilla makes it sound like he was maybe sitting outside, and he walks right into the bedroom. But the guys are saying that at some point he walked out of the bedroom. So I don't know if Joe took some time to get there. If Elvis never walked out of the bedroom, seems odd that two of the guys that agree are Billy and Larry. It's very odd that Billy and Larry agree about anything. So it seems to me that portion has to be the truth, that he walked out of the bedroom. But at some point, Joe Esposito comes. He sees Elvis. He calls the colonel. The colonel shows up. He sees Elvis. He calls a doctor. The doctor shows up. He calls another doctor. So I think what we could take from this is each person saw that Elvis needed medical assistance. He's got this golf ball size swelling on his head. Nobody takes any action except for Priscilla, who calls Joe. Joe calls the colonel instead of calling a doctor. Nobody's called a doctor or medical aid yet. The colonel calls the doctor. And the colonel's right, because when the doctor looks at him, he calls another doctor, which means this is a medical emergency that needs medical attention. The other doctor brings an x-ray. They determine that Elvis has a concussion. Sonny West says he's got a bump on the head, but the truth is he has a concussion. He requires some days in bed. The doctor's ordering 2 weeks. I don't think he makes it 2 weeks. But he's in bed at least through the 11th. That's Saturday. That's when they're having the meeting. And so now Colonel Parker systematically restructures Elvis's entire world, perhaps with Elvis's blessing, or perhaps all on his own. It's very, this is a time when Elvis probably cannot consent. He may have consented, but he's not really in a mental state to consent. Nobody would have him sign legal paperwork if they knew he was under the effects of this concussion at this time. He's probably under the influence of drugs as well that have been prescribed to treat the pain from the concussion as well as his need for sleep. He now medically requires sleep. And Colonel Parker may seem to be overreacting to the situation, but people are losing large amounts of money at this moment. People who have put this money up with faith in Elvis. And if this had happened and Elvis had not put up that earlier resistance, probably would be a much easier situation. But now the money people are probably questioning what's going on. But they also showed up when Elvis got hurt. They were there. They saw the golf ball size lump on his head, so they know. Hi, chillin' in Canada. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Pat says you would think someone besides Parker would have called the doctor. And Jen says exactly, Pat. But it was the colonel. So the colonel will later be blamed by Billy and Marty, saying that he took advantage of Elvis during this period and he forced him to sign this 50% contract. We could argue about whether the 50% contract is or is not to Elvis's benefit. I think it's fairly clear that mostly it's not. But, you know, we could take stands on that, but that has nothing to do with what's happening right now. Because that contract was signed in late 1966 and took effect January 2nd. So it's already been in effect for 2 months. Now, Elvis may still be bitter about it, but there have been other ups and downs in the business relationship since that point in time. It could still be lingering for him, though. But he's not signing any paperwork that has anything to do with it during this recovery period. He may sign paperwork about other stuff. I'm not saying that he didn't do that. I'm just saying that whatever he did, it's not what Marty and Billy thought it was. It's not what they published that it was. So that, to me, brings up, there's a lot of controversy out in the Elvis world right now about what you should and you shouldn't publish, and about if it's the truth, does that mean you can publish it, that it's open season to publish it? But I think we could even step away from that and say, in this case, where they've made statements about contracts that had nothing to do with this point in time, because they were already signed and in effect, and Elvis didn't sign them at this period, these two have implied that he did. Now, they imply it, and they reference the contract, and they do state that they don't know, and that they learned about the 50% contract, at least Billy, and I'm sure Marty too, after Elvis passed away. And Billy even says, like everybody else, which would indicate Marty, because Billy did talk to Marty. They remained in contact after Elvis's death at different points in time. They got together to do projects where they talked about Elvis. So I think that in that case, they have connected this emotionally in their heads. So that's emotionally true to them. It's their emotional remembrances. They use somebody else to help them write these memories, though, these books that the memories are published in. And those people really let them down by not verifying with the timelines. And therefore, these pieces that are published, they're not really true at all. They still reflect their feelings of the time, that Elvis was taken advantage of while he was under the influence. But the exact reasoning is absolutely not true. And therefore, should that be published? Is that protected? Like, I don't know. But otherwise, how would we find the history? I don't know. It's a whole different debate. But I just find it interesting, and it fits right into this little section. But Colonel Parker says, according to Larry Geller, things are going to change around here. We're going to have to cut back a little. Elvis is spending too much money. Too much money has been going out. Everybody's going to have to take a pay cut. So the colonel comes in and he delivers what's probably the most devastating news to the guys. There's going to be a hit to your pocketbook. Everybody's going to take a salary cut. Less money's going to come to you each week from Vernon's office. And then they move on to the next change. And the colonel announces that from this point forward, there's only one foreman. Now, they'd had two foremen. It had been Joe Esposito and Marty Lacker. Marty Lacker's demoted. He's no longer the co-foreman. Now, it's softened in the meeting because Marty is immediately reassigned to special projects. And he's now the head of special projects. And the first special project is Elvis and Priscilla's wedding. So he's now working on the logistics, most of which I believe are talking to Elvis about what he wants to do with the wedding. But in the end, I think it's the colonel who really pulls off the whole wedding. So not sure how much Marty has to do with it, other than the tux that Elvis wears. But we're going to get a lot more into that as we get into the wedding itself. But that's what Marty's in charge of now. But just to be clear, he's demoted. He is not allowed to write checks out of the checkbook anymore. That's really what's being said here. He no longer has access to the checkbook. Don't give invoices to be paid to Marty anymore. They go to Joe. If there's questions about who needs to do what, you don't ask Marty. You ask Joe. Joe's in charge now. Now, Joe's always been in charge. Although he will always, he always describes it as they're all equal. And he was just doing some jobs that were more logistical in nature because he used to do payroll in the Army. So he was good with books and numbers. But he's really the guy, if you want to talk to Elvis within the group, and it's a very busy period, you talk to Joe and Joe gets you in if you need it. Or if you need to borrow money, which is a lot of what the guys want to talk about, you go to Joe. And Joe determines if he's gonna ask Elvis for the money that you want to ask for. Now, at this point in time, they also cut off the loans, according to Becky Yancey. They stopped giving out loans to anybody. And the way Marty always described it is the loans were gifts that Elvis did not expect to be repaid back, but they were listed as loans on the paperwork for tax purposes. Now, it feels like maybe Becky never got a loan because she does not describe this. To her, they were loans. She doesn't make any special references to them other than that Elvis loaned employees money. She doesn't make any references to whether they were paid back or as if they were to be received as gifts. She just says that at this period they stopped doing the loans. Now, because she uses the word loans, it indicates to me it's marked as loans, but it also indicates to me that loans get paid back. Because that's what a loan is, right? Otherwise, she herself would probably use the vernacular of gift, but don't know for sure. And Chillen in Canada is saying that yes, Joe Esposito had a distinct position. And Larry Geller says that Colonel Parker said, everybody brings their problems to Elvis. We were instructed to no longer discuss our personal problems with Elvis, but to take them to Joe Esposito, who, though already the group foreman, was now officially anointed by Parker. So there's a few interesting things on what Larry says here. First of all, he attributes a quote directly to the Colonel. So Larry's first book was published in 1980, which would have been 13 years after the events that we're talking about right here. Now, I don't know if in that book he referenced these events. I know he referenced them in a later book, but I don't know if he referenced them in that book. I kind of feel he did, and he's using the same writing over and over. But if he did, then the closest he could have remembered these events was maybe 12 years prior, right? And yet he remembers exactly what the Colonel has said. Now, this happens in all the books all the time with what Elvis says, what the Colonel says, what other people say. Exact memories of quotes. And then these quotes move forward through the myth and the legend as true quotes of what these people said. We don't really know that these are true quotes of what these people said. This is what Larry remembers that Colonel said. So we should always remember that as we look at quotes like this. But the first thing he says is, everybody brings their problems to Elvis. That's the quote from the Colonel. Everybody brings their problems to Elvis. And then Larry goes on to explain what that means. But if I were to explain what it means problems is a code word for a request for money. Okay, these problems are not my grass is too tall and I got to sharpen my lawnmower blade. You know, do you want to come over and help me do it? Or I got this problem, my kid's growing up and they're getting all C's at school and I want them to get B's. You know, what kind of advice do you have? That's not the kind of problems they're bringing. They're bringing problems like, can't make my rent payment this month. I can't make the car payment this month. I'm not able to afford food for my family this month. I overspent here and I need money. My other family member has a financial issue. That's what these problems are. They're all requests for money. And so I almost don't think that the Colonel was subtle enough to use the word problems. I think he very clearly said something about asking for money, but Larry Geller remembers it in a softer manner as bringing their problems to Elvis. Now, others also describe it in this manner, but they're the ones that are bringing the problems. And so I don't think any of them want it to be known that the problems are all financial issues. Now, I can't prove that. Maybe they are bringing other kind of problems to Elvis. But I think that all the problems, if we looked at them, kind of boil down to they can be solved with money. But maybe I'm too cynical about that. So you guys tell me what you think. I don't have a degree in Elvis. I don't have any qualifications to talk about Elvis. I'm just bringing you what's been reported in other books and what we know as source material. So we're hearing from the people that were there. We're looking at documents when we can. We're matching things together and we're coming to our own conclusions. And everybody gets to walk away with their very own opinion. So feel free to put yours in the chat into the comments. Make sure you like. Make sure you're subscribed. That you've got the notification button clicked. That it doesn't have a line through it. And I learned a brand new thing. If you click on the bell, I believe you could click on a word that says all. And YouTube is telling me that if you click on all, every time I come on live, they're guaranteeing notification. And they're saying that's the way it works for all the channels. That if you click the bell, your notifications are on, but YouTube has some kind of algorithm running that decides what you would like to be notified about based on what you're subscribed to. It's not saying they're going to notify you about everything you're subscribed to, just what it thinks you want to know. But if you click all on my channel, then Hillbilly Cat History right here, where we're at right now, then it's supposed to tell you every time I'm on live. So that's the tip that I learned earlier today. So you guys let me know if that works or not. And Chillin' in Canada says Elvis did well to accommodate all of the financial demands and needs of all those personalities over the years. Pat says exactly. And Chillin' in Canada goes on to say the handouts at Christmas to family members. And Jen agrees that she thinks Parker would not have been soft on what he said, and that everyone lived off Elvis. He worked so hard to accommodate everyone. And Pat agrees with Jen, and that Elvis was way too nice. And Chillin says, well, if it's like an extended family, so I think the people look to Elvis for his perspective or viewpoint. Maybe he was a peacekeeper. I think that's a nice way to look at it, Chillin. I have a feeling all of the peace was brought through dollars, or that's what they were ultimately looking for. But you do bring up a good point that he was the head of the clan, of his tribe. He was the chief. And so often you do take the problems of the tribe to the chief for resolution. So that could be happening too. But that would indicate that these aren't so much personal problems as they're infighting among the group. And Jen says that you can hit all on the bell. So apparently that is true. YouTube didn't lie to me on this one. But Larry goes on to say that after he quotes the Colonel, he says, we were instructed to no longer discuss our personal problems with Elvis. So he states these as personal problems, which would indicate they're not interpersonal problems. They're not group issues. There's something to do with them and their family. Something to do outside of the inner circle. And they're told to take those problems directly to Joe Esposito. So they're not denied financial aid, but they're told that financial aid is going to need to run through Joe so that Joe's aware of what financial aid's going where, or what financial aid will actually get asked of Elvis, or to just let them know we're not doing financial aid anymore, which I kind of think is why they're having it go to Joe. Becky's telling us later that they cut off all the loans. So I think they've rerouted it to Joe, and then Joe says, we don't do it anymore, guys. I'm sorry. Now, I've worked places where they used to give payroll loans, and as the HR guy, it was my job to let people know that that policy had been changed, and that's the way it was done. When there were 5 or 6 employees that habitually asked for a loan, and one day I had to tell them that the boss wasn't going to do it anymore, and they were very upset about it, but everybody adjusted. And it's a terrible cycle, really, because once they take the loan, where I worked, it had to be repaid, right? So then it would come out of the next check, which puts you in a position where you basically had to ask for another loan. So I had to slowly wean them off the loans. And so I understand what Joe and Colonel Parker might be dealing with here. And Priscilla says, oh, well, let's finish off what Larry said. He said Joe was already the group foreman. So therefore, nothing changed. The only thing that changed was with Marty. Marty was co-foreman. Now Marty's not co-foreman. There's no shake up in the structure of the group any other than for Marty. Nobody's reporting directly to Marty, so it's just one less guy to write checks. It's really not a big deal to anybody else. But to Larry, it's a big deal because he says Joe is now officially anointed by Parker, meaning he's some kind of lackey of Colonel Parker. That Larry does not trust Joe as an employee of Elvis. He believes that Joe's loyalties are lying with Colonel Parker. That's what I'm reading out of this comment. But again, you guys might read something else. But when you use this word anointed, that's this whole ritualistic, spiritual comparison to a church, basically, that Parker is some kind of priest, and Joe is now his sycophant. Okay, so I believe it's a coded insult from Larry against both Joe and Colonel Parker. And Priscilla Presley says, the Colonel said, so we're going to run into the same thing. Priscilla's going to put words in the Colonel's mouth. Now, we know that Larry did not like the Colonel. So we know that there's a bias there, and that helps us as we look at Larry's comments to filter Larry's comments. But how did Priscilla feel about the Colonel? You know, at one point in time, Priscilla was very buddy-buddy with the Colonel. And she was very buddy-buddy with Vernon for a while. Then there was a divorce. I don't think Vernon or the Colonel cared for her much during that period. I think the Colonel was probably very upset with her, specifically because of the sellout of the 73 royalties, which was basically required by Elvis in order to pay off Priscilla quickly from the divorce. And I think Parker understood what was, I know he did, what was being lost. I'm sure he was angry about that to Priscilla for a while. But after Elvis passes away, Vernon gets much more friendly with Priscilla because she is the mother of Lisa. And so she's the adult representing Lisa. There's no getting rid of her. She's now there forever, locked into all of it because Lisa technically owns Graceland, even though she was a minor. So she couldn't come into her inheritance. So Priscilla's locked in. And the Colonel begins to deal with her, and she likes the Colonel, and the Colonel's making everybody a lot of money. And then there's this lawsuit that comes up from the state against the Colonel, or the E-state from the Colonel, depending on how you think about this. But the Colonel gets sued. When it's all said and done, there's a lot of bad publicity for the Colonel, but he gets all the money. He gets like a few $1 million. And Priscilla continues to talk very friendly about him. So I think that Priscilla does like the Colonel as a person, and that we should consider that as we read what she says. I think she also saw him as a person she could lay blame and stuff on. Somewhat in the way that Elvis would sometimes use the Colonel. When Elvis didn't want to do something, he could always say, Colonel's calling, I've got to go. Colonel said I can't do this. You have to ask the Colonel if I could do that. And that relieves him of the responsibility of saying no. It's important that Elvis not say no in public, because then he's never a negative person. And that's very good for his image. But what Priscilla says is, the Colonel said, dealing with one person is one thing, but 11 plus his own problems is enough for any man to buckle under. So Priscilla says she's at this meeting. They're all in Elvis's bedroom together. No one's told us where exactly they are, but Larry's talking about Elvis being in his bed. And what Larry remembers the Colonel saying is much, much harsher, even it may be softened, than what Priscilla remembers the Colonel saying. She remembers him being very sympathetic towards Elvis. This is enough for any man to buckle under. He doesn't even have to hit his head. He's got his own problems. And then he's got 11 people. So now we know how many people are in at the meeting. There's 11. The Colonel is addressing 11 employees. That's not Priscilla. Priscilla makes 12. The Colonel makes 13. Elvis makes 14. There's 14 people in this bedroom. Elvis, the Colonel, Priscilla, 11 guys. Who are the 11 guys? Well, we know Joe Esposito. We know Marty Lacker. We know Larry Geller. And we know Billy Smith. So we got 4. That's all that we can really say we know for sure there. Sonny's placed himself there by talking about Priscilla. So I guess we could say Sonny's there. But I don't think he is. There's another reason I don't think he is, but I don't want to talk about it right now. Red West, his cousin, Sonny's cousin, Red West is there. But he hasn't come into the story in any way. So we know 5 of the guys, maybe 6 if Sonny is there, but again, I don't think Sonny's there. So I think it's 5 guys. That leaves 6 other people that we have no idea who are there. Now, we have some idea, because we know who flew there with him. We know Ray Sidon, who's known as Chief. He's probably there, so that's probably number 6. And Gigi Gamble is probably there. That's Patsy Presley's husband. And Patsy is, of course, Patsy Gamble, because she's married to Gigi. So that's 7. We got a long way to go. Still got 4 to go. I don't know who they are. So you guys let me know who you think they are. Who else is here in this room hearing what the Colonel has to say? And Priscilla Presley goes on and she says, the Colonel said, Elvis should concentrate on his career. He's an artist, not a shoulder to cry on. Leave him alone and let him do his work. What I hear the Colonel saying in this quote, Elvis should concentrate on his career. That means Elvis is not concentrating on his career. And we could agree with that because we've seen Elvis on the Circle G Ranch. He is not concentrating on his career if you consider his career to be the movies that he's contractually obligated to make. Now, we probably should consider that as a very important part of Elvis's career. But at this moment, I believe Elvis was concentrating on a completely different aspect of his career, which was, I've got to move on to a new something, and he doesn't know what it is yet. And he's working it out in an artistic manner there on the ranch. The Colonel doesn't see that. The Colonel sees it as he's not concentrating on his career. And there is some truth to what the Colonel's saying. Especially when you look at it from the Colonel's point of view. The Colonel says he's an artist. So I believe the Colonel's recognizing that Elvis is an artist. I think the Colonel's also telling us that that's something that the Colonel doesn't really understand. He doesn't know how an artist, how their mind works, or what makes them tick, or any of that. What he knows is he's got an artist. And that artist has got to art, or whatever it is that artists do. But that these people are distracting him from it by crying on his shoulders. And so maybe they're the reason that Elvis isn't concentrating on his career. Because he knows he's not concentrating on the career. There's got to be a reason. Because he's always concentrated on it before. And he's always been an artist. But now all these people are crying on his shoulder. So leave him alone and let him do his work. The Colonel's taking care of business. Business must be taken care of. That's why we're all here. You all are interfering with the business. We should also remember that when the Colonel walked in, and I don't know what it's like today during the meeting, but when the Colonel came in the middle of the crisis, at the beginning of a workday, I think we can assume that several of the gentlemen had been using amphetamines at that point, because that's the point in the day when they would typically pop them to get ready to go to work. And the Colonel's no fool. And he would have seen that. And he would have seen, I mean, there's got to be a reason nobody called the doctor. And so now the Colonel is cleaning up a huge mess. And now we've got pay cuts, and we got people that are being told, stop getting in the way of business. But that's where we're going to have to leave it today, because we've reached our hour. Hi, Linda Jewell. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you guys. And Chillin saying that for sure Elvis was not in the zone with all the distractions. And just like the Colonel said, he had his own problems. And those problems were, how's he going to keep this career going? So the Colonel is focused on the short-term aspects of the career, finishing the contracts that are in place, setting up new contracts for the future. Elvis is in it for the long-term future. He's just made the album, How Great Thou Art. He sees a bigger path for himself. He sees the cross at the ranch. He knows that he's on this right path. So he starts to continue down it, but he's got to go back. Got to finish out this clam bake. Now he's fallen and hit his head, something no one foresaw. And in this moment of need, I don't think his guys came through for him. I think it was the Colonel. I don't think Priscilla came through for him. At least she called Joe. And at least Joe called the Colonel. But I don't think anybody was taking care of business till the Colonel showed up. And then the doctors came. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And you ended the day with us yesterday, and now you're up with us today. I definitely appreciate your dedication. And Luann says that she loves Elvis, misses him very dearly, and that he will never be forgotten. And that where she's at, it's 6 a.m. on Saturday. Well, we're going to go out with a song like we always do. And this one is going to be about all the trailers that he's hopefully going to see on the property when he gets back to the Circle G, because they're contracted for, and they should be rolling onto the lot right now, getting hooked up. And Elvis loved these trailers because they were just like the title of this song, A House on Wheels.
He rode past Green Acres with a glimmer in his eye. Said, wouldn't it be something if my folks could live nearby? 12 trailers later, they were rolling down the lane. Concrete dreams and carpet floors, love poured out like rain. He bought one for Grandma, parked it close to his own. Said, you've got 2 homes now, no need to be alone. One for his daddy, one for his boys. He built a little kingdom, not just for show but joy. They called it trailer trash, he called it home. A place for the weary, the lost and alone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to give peace to his mama and joy to his boys. It wasn't steel and wheels, it was love made bold. A house on wheels with a heart of gold. The county said no, the neighbors raised Cain, but Bernie worked midnight through thunder and rain. They poured the pads, ran the lines, made it right, while Elvis rode a rising sun at first morning light. Some said he was foolish, some said he was grand, but he just wanted laughter to echo through the land. He sat on the floor near tears in his eyes, said, why do they fight me when I'm trying to rise? They called it trailer trash, he called it home. A place for the weary, the lost and alone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to give peace to his mama and joy to his boys. It wasn't steel and wheels, it was love made bold. The house on wheels with a heart of gold. He dreamed of a commune, a circle of grace, where every soul had a warm, safe place. They tried to block it, but he made it real with a stubborn heart and a boot on the heel. They called it trailer trash, he called it home. A place for the weary, the lost and alone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to give peace to his mama and joy to his boys. It wasn't steel and wheels, it was love made bold. A house on wheels with a heart